ladies and gentlemen, but what is more important, dear friends, respected Mr. Johannes Ebert, Christina North, Tanja Kruger, and media representative from Germany, respected Roberta Ladjozowski, and all the others who are here with us tonight. We could not have received a bigger honor than the one we did from the Goethe Institute with our inclusion and participation in the Spaces of Freedom in Freiraum project. In its basic disposition, this narrative provided the needed space to explore our boundaries in experiencing and understanding what freedom actually represents, which is very difficult. Also, this project is of special importance for Kontrapunkt because it is inherent to what Kontrapunkt is striving for more than 20 years, and that is to critically explore each of big narratives, including the one connected to freedom. The overall role of the Goethe Institute, and especially in Macedonia, is of immense importance, and I believe that this cooperation will continue to flourish. In countries such as Macedonia is, the exchange of experience as well as recognition of the emancipatory cultural flows within the socio-cultural space is of paramount significance. This is something that we have recognized in our co-creation and partnership with the Goethe Institute programs. I would especially like to thank the director of Goethe Institute Skopje for her extraordinary sensibility to recognize points of importance for our cultural context and for her great openness and knowledge of topics that are of priority and urgency to be supported. Thank you, Tanja Kruger. Tonight, I would also like to extend my gratitude to Mr. Johannes Ebert, General Secretary of the Goethe Institute in Munich, who was kind enough to come to Skopje to attend our festival, and whose keynote lecture will happen after the film screenings, followed by the discussion. We are also excited to have our partners from Denmark here this evening, the Film Festival for Architecture for Copenhagen, who will share their experiences with us, and to have Daniel Serafimovsky here with us tonight, the man who is the bridge for the stories presented. And finally, I would like to thank to all people who were working on this movie, which is the Kontrapunkt's product. Vladimir Jankovsky, who who founded actually the basic idea of the movie. George Jovanovic, who was the director and the artistic line of the movie. Elena Veljanovska, who is really the vertical of Kontrapunkt and what is happening around Kontrapunkt. Now I invite you all to turn on your critical attention and join us for the screening of two films. Thank you. Now I would like to invite Mr. Johannes Ebert to have his keynote, after which it will be a discussion.
Thank you. Yeah. Dear Iskra Geshoska, dear friends, dear colleagues, liebe Freunde, liebe Kollegen, it's difficult to have a keynote after two very impressive films, but now you have to listen to it. I'm here for only one day because I'm on a trip through Europe. I'm on a trip from the east of Europe, here, Skopje, to the west of Europe, to Carlisle in England. Why is that? Because we have this huge project, Freiraum, with about 50 cities in Europe, and I said, this is so important for me as a project of the Goethe Institute worldwide that I at least want to see some of these projects. And you see me now very impressed, and I'm unhappy that I have to leave tomorrow and I should come back. But this is somehow this project from one city to another. The beginning of my keynote starts in Great Britain. In the middle of the last century, there was an architectural movement originating there. It spread to worldwide, to Tbilisi, to Boston, to Buenos Aires, to Kyoto, to Caracas, and to Gießen in Germany, and into the then Yugoslavia in particular. And as you know better than I do, and as we have seen in the film, to Skopje. The location we find ourselves in today was inspired by this movement, and so are or were many other buildings in the city. This trend is known as Brutalism. The term was coined in 1953 in an article by the British architect duo Alison Smithson and Peter Smithson. Many people believe that the word brutalism comes from the word brutal, brutal in German. But it actually comes from the French word brut, direct, raw, austere. Concrete is the material that characterizes this architectural movement, and unlike in other building styles, it is not concealed. On the contrary, it is on display, and as concrete is an extraordinarily sculptural building material, it gives great design freedom. Huge cubes, bold, jagged roof designs, abstract shapes, elegant sweeping ramps. As we heard in the film in 1963, an earthquake destroyed Skopje, brutalism played a crucial role in the rebuilding of the city. Everybody from Skopje, of course, is aware of this. Anyone who doesn't know Skopje quite so well can get a feel for it in the film that we have just seen. A city made of concrete, which keeps surprising you with architectural daring, buildings which pick up on the shapes of the special topography, the River Vardar and the mountains in the distance. A city with generous open spaces, which simply invite the locals to stay for a while. A city with buildings which aim to give as many people as possible a comfortable home. For brutalism doesn't not only mean concrete. Brutalism also involves aesthetics, which means the desire to deliver light, functional, modern living spaces using cost-effective, easy-to-work materials. It is an architectural movement which combines the promises of the very modern with progress, light, freedom, participation in society and cultural life, access to public spaces and dignified living conditions. Yet brutalism is also controversial, as it opposes conventional concepts of beauty, comfort and homeliness so radically. Many people don't find the buildings beautiful but forbidding, not brave but cold, grey and drab. This is one reason why brutalist buildings are under threat in so many locations around the world. When the ravages at times take their toll, they are more likely to be pulled down than renovated. The German Architecture Museum in Frankfurt devoted an exhibition to brutalism last year and also launched an initiative, SOS Brutalism, a database listing brutalist buildings. Those which are particularly threatened are listed separately. And anyone who wishes to contribute to their preservation is invited to do so. I must mention particularly that Skopje plays a very special role in this database with its unique brutalist architectural inheritance. For as part of a city redesign going by the name which we saw in the film very impressively, Skopje 2014, this inheritance has not been completely destroyed, as we have seen in this film. I believe the Opera House is a particular expressive example in this regard. We saw a scene also there. Without a single construction measure being taken on the building itself, the overall impression has completely changed, as so many new buildings and monuments have sprung up around the Opera House that the wide open space has been restricted today. You can no longer see anything of the former relationships with the riverbank in the ensemble. The historicizing, eclectic new buildings are too overpowering. With a little imagination, you can see a greater fault in this. On one side stands the ideal of the very modern and the promises attached to this. On the other side, the restoration projects of our past, namely the return of the nation to the people, to a past which only exists in romantic glorification. You might be asking why I talked so much about this. Especially the last sentence hints at the answer. The Freiraum project, which the Goethe Institute launched in 2017, and which I'm presenting today, has a great deal to do with the tension created recently. I refer to the tension that we see in many countries of Europe now. The tension between societal ideals, freedom, participation, peaceful coexistence among different groups in society, and the absence of material need. And the present day, on the other hand, which tramples all over these ideas by demanding isolation and restoration. If you allow me, I would like to use the lost space around the Opera House in Skopje as a symbol of all the questions raised as part of the Freiraum project. What does freedom mean in today's Europe? Where is it coming under pressure? What can we do to create and protect free spaces? The Goethe Institute is well aware that Europe is perceived almost everywhere as being in crisis. If we look at France yesterday, if we look at the Brexit, and so on and so on. Stubbornly clinging to the narrative of a united Europe can easily seem like a denial of reality. Just as Europe must face the challenge of the present-day situation, we must put more clear-cut markers down to show our commitment to Europe. We must set our course not by naive enthusiasm, but by a willingness to engage in dialogue in order to stand for our core values, such as openness, freedom of movement, justice, and the integration of all members of society. And I was very impressed by the second film, which I didn't see before, and I want to react just spontaneously. I was very impressed by all the deep thoughts that the Macedonians living in Denmark giving about home, about what we call in Germany Heimat, about how you dream in Macedonia, speak in English, but think in I don't know which other language. These are very deep questions about fluent identities, which we all have. My grandfather is a refugee from Czechia, who came after the Second World War to Germany. My wife is a refugee from Asia, from Laos, who was 2 years in a refugee camp, and then went to America, then went to study in Vienna. On the way there we met. Yeah, I was living in Kiev, in Cairo, in Moscow. So this is something that we all share. And this is something that Europe gives us the opportunity to live freely, because Europe is liberal. On the other hand, my son, my oldest son, 16 years old, who looks more like my wife than like me, he was just some weeks ago coming home from school, and then one man said to him, "Go home where you belong." And this is a big problem. Europe faces challenges at many levels. This is one of them. And Europe is looking for answers, which we are exploring with the Freiraum project. More than 40 European Goethe institutes and about 50 partner institutions took part in this project, which was launched exactly 1 year ago, where we met in Warsaw. And together, they look for productive ways to counter the current crisis and tensions in Europe, not as a naive glorification of past ideals, but as a willingness to take part in self-reflection. My impression after the two films is that the Skopje-Copenhagen pairing was particularly successful. I don't know if the Copenhagen colleagues are already here. Where are they? Where are they? We didn't see them. They came too late with, with the plane. Yeah, just. My impression is that you were very successful. I think when you first time met, you said, okay, what do we do with each other? But I think you succeeded really to ask yourself questions which then led to these thoughts and these films. And this was very impressive for me and I think for all of us. So I'm quite happy that this Freiraum project, which is a big experiment, works quite well. The organizations are different, but as we see, they are enriching themselves. The partner organizations Kontrapunkt, with a societal theoretical background, and the Copenhagen Architecture Festival, with its architectural orientation, engage with each other. I'm very thankful for these two films tonight, and I want to thank all of the participants. All of the participants of Kontrapunkt and of Copenhagen Architecture Festival, and of course to my colleagues in the Goethe Institute. I was very happy to meet my colleagues here in the Goethe Institute in Skopje today. And I thank you especially for giving me the opportunity to give some thoughts on the project here, which is very important for me. Thank you very much.
Mr. Johannes Ebert, that you already had a chance to hear at the moment. We are also very happy to have you here in the closure of this phase of our two projects. Johannes Ebert is the Secretary General of the Goethe Institute since 2012. But he also has an interesting educational background in Islamic studies and political science in Freiburg and Damascus. And also he worked as a journalist in Heilbronn. He has a long career in the Goethe Institute, from being the director of the Goethe Institute in Kiev, as he already mentioned, and then being the director of the Goethe Institute in Cairo and regional director of North Africa and the Middle East. But among other things, what I also find interesting for tonight, I will not go through the whole biography because it's really rich. Johannes Ebert is focusing not only on advancing European collaboration and integration, but also on intensifying engagement in crisis-ridden regions and countries going through radical change. For example, Ukraine, North Africa, and the Middle East. He's also particularly dedicated to supporting refugees with cultural and educational projects in the neighboring countries of Syria and in Germany. And I would just like to shortly introduce my other guest. So, Signe Sophie Bøggild. Probably I'm pronouncing that correctly. She's one of the two representatives that are with us here. Josephine Michał is also in the audience, and they're both representing our partner from Copenhagen that we actually met thanks to this project. They're running the Copenhagen Architectural Festival, and they started only 2 years with their festival before us with this festival. So it started in 2014 in Copenhagen, and it has worked to create a dynamic and contemporary platform to disseminate the importance of architecture in Denmark, but in relation to everything that is happening abroad. So the festival is exploring how architecture impacts our lives and the world, but also how our lives and the world affect architecture. So they are really working on this relationship. Another thing, also I will not go through the whole biography, another thing that I find very interesting is that they say that architecture is, their approach is that architecture is for everyone and not just for the professionals, not just for the architects. So on their festival, through the public program, they have film screenings, exhibitions, lectures, debates, city walks, and bicycle tours, workshops, conferences, everything that is not necessarily considered as architecture per se, but actually it is quite defined by the architecture. So here I would like to stop with this and maybe just give a small comment before I ask you the first question, because as part of the project, we were also part of the core group that was going and working in Copenhagen. It was also interesting for us how to position ourselves in this new environment. Specifically for me, I'm also somehow I saw this project as a very personal, being a migrant myself in the last 5 years. I live in Germany and I'm still between Germany and Macedonia somehow. It's very hard to make this hard gap. And then it's really important through the movie that also we have produced, I have opened or sometimes answered some of the questions that I'm posing myself. So one of the aspects that I would like to just throw now on the table, and maybe we could expand on it later, depending on how interesting it is for everyone, is this aspect of integration. For me, let's say that is not really an issue that is relevant here in Macedonia, but myself living in Germany, I was going through the integration course myself, and then somehow the system is quite familiar, but back then the refugee crisis was not so actual. After that, this question has been really worked on and even further developed. And it's something that is constantly being spoken about, but definitely how one integrates in a society, it can be very structural, but it can be also very personal. For example, my system of integration was my husband making music playlists with German music that he liked, and this is how I was learning some phrases of the language that somehow were not coming in the school classes, among other things. But this was also a question for us when we were approaching and a discussion afterwards in the editing phase, how far can we go in commenting a society that is not so familiar, like the Danish one? So this is somehow a question that goes to both of you first. I was actually, to finish with this, I was actually really inspired to also go on this question, and specifically maybe hear later your opinion by the latest news from last week I read in the New York Times of this idea by the Minister of Integration, who wants to basically propose isolating the denied asylum seekers. But what was very interesting for me in that article was that also he was proposing to deny the right to integration program of these people. So I just somehow try to connect these two lines, like what I know from Germany and what I somehow heard, but really we were not very brave to the end to go deeper, because it was just 10 days in Denmark. But I would like to hear both of your opinions on this topic.
You start. I already talked.
Hello, can you hear me? I think it's okay. It's working. I mean, how far can you go? I'm definitely also a person who have been needing to go abroad to learn something more about my city and my country, I think, and myself. I've been spending time in London and Paris and Rotterdam, various places, mostly in Europe. But it's amazing to think about Denmark being a country which actually managed to host 250,000 Germans after the war. And then, that it can be such a problem now to host very few, really. I think it was around 20,000 people that we received top during the so-called refugee crisis, because it's an ongoing phenomenon. And now actually we've got a new financial law who gave 500 million Danish kroner to the environment or the climate program of the government, whereas it's quite unbelievable that there's a kind of deserted island called Lindholm that is now going to be a place to kind of ship people who are supposed to leave the country, criminal refugees who denies to leave the country, apparently. So that's kind of disturbing. So I think we have both a lot of welcoming attitude and then this kind of more hostile, and I guess, as you were saying before, it's really a trend in Europe these days, like looking at Alternative für Deutschland or looking at all these phenomena, Orban or whoever.
I mean, coming back to the film, I was very impressed by the deep thoughts of the Macedonians living in Denmark. The lady in the end said that the climate is changing, that refugees, foreigners and so on are much more under pressure than before. And I have to say Germany has a similar experience. I mean, after the war, they took several millions of Germans from the east and integrated them in Germany. And now everybody says this was easy because they spoke the same language and they had the same religion and so on and so on. But as I know from my family, they were not very loved in the new part of coming from the east, from Czechia, from Poland and so on, and suddenly going into Western Germany. And now this is like presented as a very harmonic process, but of course it was not. They really talked bad about these refugees from Eastern Germany at that time, but they succeeded to integrate them in society. I think it's a little bit of the same topic. When the refugees were coming to Munich, I remember very well, they were highly welcomed. Thousands of refugees were coming in, and the Munich people came there and greeted them and gave them clothes and everything. But during the time, it changed. And you saw all this in our society. A radical party was coming up because as an opposition to the refugees. In my opinion, Germany needs foreign people. Germany needs foreign people, and I think refugees. But there's a figure which came out some weeks ago. Nearly 400,000 refugees are now working in Germany on the working market. So, in numbers, it's quite successful. But still, there is a certain fear of the strangeness of other people of different religion, which is growing and growing. And this is also, of course, a topic that we are having in the Freiraum project. We really think that liberal values or liberal societies have to help other peoples who come as far as they can. Maybe there have been too much at one time in Germany. It was really many. But we should be open and try to give them a place in our society. I think one thing is very important for us. Language is very important. I think it was a good thing of your husband to give you German songs to listen to. And I remember when my wife, when we met, she was only speaking English and we spoke English together. And then I had to leave abroad. And she spent Christmas with my parents who don't speak English very well. I said, now we only speak German from this moment on. So this was very practical. I think this is an important topic when you talk about integration.
yes, I mean, as I said, I agree that it has to be somehow customized. I won't be very long. I have one question for Mr. Ebert and another for Signe, and then we will open up. The question for you would be something that was interesting for me from the very beginning of this project. I find it quite brave that the pairs were selected with an algorithm. That's really, like a brave step. But so far, from what I have seen on the website, it seems like the projects have worked. So this is like one question. There are a few smaller ones. So one thing would be, what did you learn from this project? How did adding these 42 different voices and views shape the project from what has originally been planned? And what were so far the biggest challenges? And another thing I was wondering, maybe I'm not super informed, but from what I could find is that this is a project now just focusing on Europe, but is there an idea that this project is also, the problem of freedom is discussed worldwide, because it is becoming a worldwide issue? It's not only Europe that is facing these challenges, and is there a plan for widening the scope to other areas?
About the Freiraum project, I have to explain a little bit. After the referendum of the Brexit, we said something's going wrong completely in Europe now. And we sat together, my colleagues and me, and said, what are we doing now? We have Hungary and Poland with quite populist movements who close their borders, who isolate different parts of society. We have the Brexit, we had the AfD coming up in Germany, so we said something's wrong, and the task of a cultural institute, which is obligated to liberal values, democratic values, is to do something about this. And so we said, we wrote a paper, as people always do when they don't know what to do. We wrote a paper and we said we want to address what is the core of European values. And we said the core of European values is freedom, because freedom is the basic of tolerance, of identity, of diversity. Yeah, you need the spirit of freedom. And we said, okay, now we want to discuss this in a network in Europe. And I have to say, with this project, we concentrated on Europe because Europe is very dear to us. I mean, it's us. It's not Germany. It's Europe. It's us. Yeah. So we said we focus on Europe, and then my colleagues, Christina Nord is here from Goethe Institute Brussels. They said, okay, we do a network project with one partner from each country, but we create pairs. Every city has to define a question which is important for the city. Yeah, one city said it's isolation, the other said it's migration, the other said it's the freedom of art. Everybody has to formulate a question, and the other partner has to answer to this question. Why did we do this? Because we think in Europe it's very important to sometimes take the perspective of the other country. Yeah, not only our own perspective, but the perspective of the other country. And then we said we don't want the partners to match, really match, but we said the only criteria is that they have to be, that the distance between them has to be more than 1,000 kilometers. And on this criteria we developed an algorithm, and I had the honor to be in Warsaw and choose the partners. And as I said, I think in the beginning some partners said, oh, what do I do with this question? What do I do with this partner? But this was exactly the challenge that we wanted, that they had to think about how would I react to this question? How would I react to this European situation? And up to now, it's early to answer these questions, up to now we have the impression that it worked very well. There have been programs in Paris, in Milano, in Carlisle tomorrow, here tonight, in Banska Bystrica, in Brussels, and something's really going on, which we will bring together in March in Berlin, Then all projects will be presented, and then I will be able to answer your question. And then we also now have decided to continue this project on a lower level, because we think it's not a good idea to start something like this and then say it's a one-time firework, but we hope that partners, at least some of the partners, continue to work. Because I think networks of different partners in Europe, they stabilize the European idea and the question of democratic and liberal values.
Yes, I can definitely say from the Skopje team, I think, in the name of everyone, that it has definitely stirred our thoughts. And at first we were quite thinking like, what do we do now in Copenhagen? But this also brings me to you now. As I said, like when we met normally on Skype, and we just exchanged a few emails before, and it was really. And I cannot say it was hard, but we all had our own ideas how one should approach each city. Of course, everyone somehow started from meeting people, or this kind of very personal level of approaching it, and then it developed a bit bigger story that had the whole concept of freedom at the end arranged and discussed. So for the question for you as a partner is really, what were the challenges that you were facing in the project when you faced Skopje? For me, this is I'm curious now from this bit of a distance perspective for the first time, and how did it also shape you? Because I know that you started from one idea, but then at the end it really developed into something different. And what was the thing that you actually would cherish and learn from this experience, and how that experience has shaped your thoughts at the end now, after this is finished, at least this phase?
I mean, we have one protagonist, or kind of a figure appearing in both films, sitting over there, Daniel Serafimovsky, and he was really, I mean, Venka and Daniel, both of them have been incredibly useful, I think, for both our films, really, like key figures in kind of opening each city somehow, like vice versa somehow. And I would say, like, you're right. It's really a task going into a city. I've been to Skopje for 2 days, 4 years ago or something, as a tourist. That was the only. But you can't really read to see a lot of things in that short time. But it was really useful to have Daniel to share contacts with us and really opening the city to us through some of these incredible personalities like Robert and Philip and a lot of very very gifted and articulate people about some of the issues you're dealing with here in Skopje. I know what you mean, like it's difficult to really see your own role somehow in it. And in the beginning we wanted to integrate a lot more about Copenhagen and us coming from a different context and comparing, because there are also similarities somehow with our kind of very planned, like coming from somehow socialist societies from the post-war period. You could say there could be some, maybe some parallels at the beginning we were thinking about exploring. But then, it turned out a bit differently. But still, I think some of the key questions we had, that were also appearing in the film. But then we calculated with it being much shorter, and then we got so... we got a lot of rich material that you can see in the film. So, But we wanted it to be very much like the people from here saying the things. So we didn't want to put words in the mouth of people, but somehow try to look at it in a nuanced way. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for your view, because for us, even though it's a known story, sometimes we speak about it, but this is really differently framed, and sometimes you're just asking the questions differently maybe, and then it gives another perspective, even when you're watching it as a local. When I saw it for the first time, this combination of people was just making it really particular. And it's really interesting that we basically at the end used really these personal contacts as doors to the cities that we didn't really know. I would like to open the floor here, and I think there is one more microphone. And if there is also need for translation, we could as well. You could pose your question in Macedonian if you feel like, and then I can translate. So, is there a first question or a comment? It doesn't have to be a question. There in the back.
Thank you very much. It is not exactly a question, but perhaps a little comment. It's about the project Skopje 2014. Well, the presentation and the explanation which were given about the aesthetic and ideological dimension of the project were very interesting, but perhaps the costs itself of the project would have deserved perhaps a more large development. The question being how a country like Macedonia, which lacks such a lot of things in the social field, can afford a project of almost 1 billion euro just for the decoration of the city. And secondary question, now that the government has changed, are there some measures or inquiries or public investigation asking how all those expenses were done concerning, for example, the tenders, how they were explained, how they were discussed, and so on. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your question. I was expecting more a question related to the guests that I have here, because I'm not sure whether I should answer this as someone from Skopje. It is something that is an ongoing process. There is definitely, as it was shown in the film, there is a procedure. It is a project that we could not afford back then. We cannot afford it now as well. But there is an ongoing procedure the prices are known, and it was openly said, a big crime done with public funds. So I really don't know what else I could add more to this topic, or whether I'm the person that could just give these answers. So sorry if this was left unanswered. I would just like to ask if there is, I see one more person in the audience, something a bit more related. Thank you.
My name is Bøggild, and I follow both films with interest, and I think they are very interesting films. And I especially like the first film because it does not has discourse around the Skopje 2014 just in the terms of what we see physical space, but also the mental space which reflects the physical space. And to me, I mean, we all agree that this is horrible project, both like a kitsch in aesthetical terms, but to me much more dangerous is the heritage we get from this project, because it's clearly, to me, fascistic project. It's not historical because we are missing centuries. It's not artistic because it is as it is. and to me the question, for example, one thing which is also in some other books, that this area around Skopje 2014 was mainly populated by Catholic community, which is also was during after earthquake used as excuse to to come somehow to vanish this community. So now it's how to I think Iskra said at one moment that earthquake that produced a city. To me, I have doubts also if it produced a city or maybe not, or the this urban plan which produced earthquakes. So now my question is, based on your experience, especially in these cities you mentioned and in this Freiraum project, how do you think we should deal with this heritage, with this heritage of Skopje? So how we should deal with this heritage? What would be your? I mean, I'm sure we are not here to to decide, but what would be your opinion? This is to me very very important.
I cannot answer this question, but I'm not an expert in Skopje. But I have to. I see the films together. I see these films together. Even if maybe you didn't want that, and maybe this one was not the intention, but I see them together. What I see in the first film, and I cannot talk about Skopje, but I can talk about my experience in countries from Eastern Europe which have changed and which were looking for a new identity. When I was director in Kiev, there was a big discussion about the question, what is the Ukrainian nation and how do we represent the Ukrainian nation in the city center of Kiev? And there was a big tender for ideas. And in the end, all the ideas, which were really progressive and clever and so on, were wiped away. And a very conservative, which reminded me of these pictures, a very conservative approach was chosen, like an arch angle on a column of 70 meters height, like a Cossack statue. Yeah, I think this is something similar which happened there, and it's the look to define a fixed identity which is rooted in the past. And I think we have this in all the Europe, in Eastern Europe, but also a big discussion in Germany about these topics. In Germany, the interesting question is, what do we do with the monuments of colonialism? It's a very big topic in Germany now, where all the newspapers are full. Do we tear down monuments of colonialism in Berlin because colonialism was unjustful? So this whole thing of monuments expressing an identity, I think it's a really, really big topic. And monuments are always something. I'm not a professional. All the architects and activists can criticize me, but in my opinion, monuments are something which are very fixed, which are very stable, which are very steady, and they do not reflect. And this is the big task of the second film, how identities are fluent, which is more difficult for people to say, I'm not like a simple man, but I'm a complex person. I'm a European, I'm a German, I'm a Swabian, my wife is, and so on and so on. So this is a fluent identity, which maybe does not need monuments. And to fix it in monuments is something which is going back and does not allow us to develop into the future. And this is something really dangerous, in my opinion, maybe more expensive than what you said in numbers for the minds of the people. Yeah, maybe we can discuss this. There are people here with more experience than me, but this is what I saw in my time when I was living in different cities of Europe.
I'm asking this because exactly when the project was launched, we had the one project with the Berlin Wall Museum and the Museum of Great Wall from France in nation building, architecture and identities. And one of the conclusions was that if this project at given time will not be answered properly, and I think now the political circumstances and tools are there to be, and I'm more with Nebojša to tear down Skopje 2014. So if it not be dealt properly, this will be a sign that you can deal with the space however you want. I mean, there will be, as you said, these mental consequences now, but also as a as a message for futures that you basically can do whatever you want. And I think this is okay. Thank you.
No, I was just thinking very quickly to say that in Denmark we also have a discussion at the moment, like there's a brutalist Viking museum in Roskilde that the Danish People's Party, this very populist party, their cultural spokesperson, he has suggested to make this kind of more Viking style, what you would imagine to be a bit more in the style of Skopje 2014 Viking style. So you get the picture. So I think we have it everywhere. You have your Schloss in Berlin, where you tore down the Palast der Republik. Also,
I don't want to talk about this one.
Yeah. So there are plenty of examples of this. It's not only in...
You know our Schloss.
Yeah. We do know it, yeah. Okay, if I would just leave space for one more question or comment, okay? And please. Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, I think I've talked too much already to both films, but so I couldn't have, what's the word?
But that's why it's nice to close it with you.
No. Well, I actually wanted to thank you for the opportunity, since I'm meeting you in person, for your teaming up of cities in this way, because I almost couldn't believe it, that it wasn't a planned thing. Because I ended up, knowing people from Skopje making a film about Copenhagen and being invited by people that I just met in Copenhagen to participate in a film about Skopje. And the timing couldn't have been more incredible, because I had just left Skopje after having lived here for a few years, a place that actually I'd never lived in properly before, and gone back to live in Copenhagen, where I haven't lived for 20 years. And then to be involved in films about both cities was just kind of weird. So thank you for that opportunity, or this kind of, the blind chance. But I suppose my question would be, do you expect, apart from this kind of chance involvement of people like myself in both films, do you think, you mentioned something about that you hope to continue this project, and that the networking that has been established between different institutions, NGOs and individuals, that's an important way of continuing or opening up the discussion about freedom in Europe. And I was just wondering how specifically that, and in a broader sense, how the project Freiraum, how do you think it might impact on a wider scale in Europe?
Firstly, I think fun is a very important element in cultural projects. I'm not against it. So I hope it was fun for you, because I think this helps in life. The second thing is when we discussed this whole thing, then we said we have to do it as a network. Not, for the Goethe-Institute, this is a big step, because Goethe-Institute are in one country, and then they work with the partners in the country. And about 5-6 years ago, we decided this is not, or maybe 10 years ago, I don't know, but we're still working on the process to learn it. This is not the way to work in a global society. But you have to work regionally. You have to work in big networks and spaces. And so for Europe, I think this was our biggest attempt to do this. And when we discussed it in our team, we said we have to continue. We would have less money for it because this is always the question, but we have to find a step that these combinations continue to work together, maybe by giving opportunities to raise, to invest some money, but so that they are able to raise money from other places, like things like intelligent ways to enlarge the whole system. But the biggest mistake would say we go to Berlin, have a big firework, and then stop. Yeah. I think our project colleagues, Christina Nord and the others, are thinking about how we do it. I cannot say it right now, but we just decided, I think in September, that we invest a little bit of money the next 2 years in this thing. Yeah. It's a very good question to ask for the effect and the. Normally we evaluate a project like this because I think also cultural institutions have to evaluate, which they didn't want to do about 10 to 15 years ago. But we created in our institution an evaluation system which with different methods which are which are very suitable for cultural projects. I could go on length in this because it's a very important topic, and I think we will, after an evaluation of the project, we will know what was the effect and not the effect, what is the English word? Wirkung, impact. Yeah. On the other hand, I think such a project alone is not enough. I think many institutions have to really openly and outspokenly discuss the question what is going on in Europe right now, and that we don't want that right-wing and nationalist thing. I think this is our only chance. Yeah, we have an election in the European Parliament in May. It will be maybe more right-wing, which will be a big question for all of us, talking about liberal systems and so on. So I think our only way as a cultural institution, together with you, together with all these partners, is to say, okay, we think that freedom is important, and diversity and openness and tolerance. We know that it's complex, that it's not so easy, that these questions are not easily solved, but that we have to discuss them and that we have to stand up for them. And I think if we all do that, it will have an impact. I'm convinced.
Okay, thank you. First, I would like to thank my guests for being present tonight. Okay.
I want to say one word, sorry. Normally after the films, the director and the artists and the participants of the film are on the stage. So I would like to thank you, and I would like the public to give a big applause to all the directors, participants and actors and makers of the film.
Thanks for making that last remark. So I would like to close this evening tonight. Thanks a lot to my guests. Also, I would like to thank the Goethe Institute from Skopje for trusting us until the very last moment and supporting us in the long years in the past. So I would like to invite all of you. Also, I'm thanking the audience for being so patient and being here for a long time. I would like to now invite all of you for a little reception outside in the foyer and, an informal part of the evening.